Ella Martinez pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway of the Steinhardt Conservatory. Her uniform was faded blue, and her hands were rough from years of hard work. She moved quietly, trying not to make noise. The sounds of music came from behind every door. Pianos, violins, and cellos filled the air with beautiful melodies. She had worked at the conservatory for 3 years now. Every day she cleaned the practice rooms where famous musicians played. She dusted the pianos, mopped the floors, and emptied the trash cans. The students and teachers barely noticed her. To them, she was just another cleaning lady. Elena liked it that way. Being invisible meant she could listen to the music without anyone bothering her. She knew the names of all the pieces the students practiced. She could tell when someone played a wrong note. Sometimes, when she was alone in a room, she would touch the piano keys very softly. Just for a second, the conservatory was one of the most famous music schools in the world. Rich families paid thousands of dollars to send their children here. The building was old and grand, with marble floors and high ceilings. Paintings of famous composers hung on the walls. Everything was clean and perfect. Elena's day started at 6 in the morning. She would arrive before most of the students and teachers came to school. She liked the quiet hours when the building was empty. The morning sun would shine through the tall windows, making everything look golden. She would start in the concert hall, wiping down the seats and cleaning the stage. Today felt different. There was excitement in the air. People were talking about a famous violinist who was visiting the school. His name was Adrian Blackwood. Elena had heard the students whispering about him in the hallways. They said he was one of the best violin players in the world. He had played with famous orchestras in London, New York, and Vienna. Elena had seen his picture in the newspapers that people left behind. He was tall and handsome, with dark hair and serious eyes. He always wore expensive clothes and looked very important. The article said he came from a rich family. His father was a famous conductor, and his mother was an opera singer. As Elena cleaned the practice rooms on the 3rd floor, she could hear someone playing violin. The music was beautiful but cold. It was technically perfect, but it lacked feeling. She knew this must be Adrian Blackwood. She had heard enough musicians to know the difference between playing notes correctly and playing with heart. Elena finished cleaning room 301 and moved to room 302. She knocked gently on the door, as she always did. When no one answered, she opened it slowly. The room was empty, but sheet music was scattered on the floor. Someone must have dropped it and forgotten to pick it up. She bent down to gather the papers. The music was complex, with many notes crowded together on each page. As she looked at the sheets, something strange happened. She could hear the music in her head. Her fingers moved slightly as if she was playing an invisible piano. The melody was sad and beautiful, like a story of lost love. Elena was so focused on the music that she didn't hear footsteps in the hallway. She didn't notice the door opening wider. She was lost in the world of notes and rhythms on the page. "What are you doing with my music?" The voice was sharp and angry. Elena looked up quickly, still holding the sheet music. A tall man stood in the doorway. He was exactly like his pictures, but more intimidating in person. His dark eyes looked at her with annoyance. Elena scrambled to her feet, the papers fluttering in her hands. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just cleaning, and I found these on the floor. I was picking them up for you." Adrian Blackwood stepped into the room and held out his hand. His expression showed that he was not pleased. "Those are very expensive compositions. They're not meant to be handled by ... He paused, looking at her uniform and cleaning cart. "By people who don't understand their value." Elena felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She handed him the sheets carefully, making sure not to crumple them. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean any harm." Adrian took the music and looked through it quickly, checking that all the pages were there. "These pieces are worth more than you make in a year. Next time, just leave things where you find them and call someone to deal with it." Elena nodded and moved toward her cart. But as she did, one more sheet of music fell from Adrian's hands. Without thinking, she reached down to pick it up. As she handed it back to him, their eyes met for a moment. In that brief second, Adrian saw something in Elena's eyes that surprised him. It wasn't the look of someone who was just cleaning up trash. It was the look of someone who understood what she was holding. But the moment passed quickly, and he dismissed the thought. "Just be more careful," he said, turning away from her. Elena finished cleaning the room in silence while Adrian practiced. She tried to focus on her work, but she couldn't stop listening to his playing. He was skilled, but something was missing. The music was perfect but cold, like a beautiful statue with no soul. When she was done cleaning, Elena gathered her supplies and pushed her cart toward the door. As she was leaving, she heard Adrian make a mistake. It was just one wrong note, but she noticed it. She almost turned around to tell him, but stopped herself. Who was she to correct a world-famous musician? The rest of Elena's day was normal. She cleaned classrooms, offices, and practice rooms. She ate her lunch alone in the small break room in the basement. She listened to students practice and teachers give lessons. But her mind kept going back to the sheet music she had seen in Adrian's room. That evening, as Elena walked to the bus stop, she thought about the encounter. She wondered what it would be like to play music like that in front of people, to have audiences clap for her, to have her picture in newspapers, but those were just dreams. She had work to do and bills to pay. Music was something she could only enjoy from a distance. Elena didn't know that her life was about to change. She didn't know that the cold, arrogant man she had met today would soon discover her secret. She didn't know that very soon she would be forced to show the world who she really was. For now, she was just Elena Martinez, the cleaning lady. Tomorrow, she would come back to work and clean more rooms. She would listen to more music and stay invisible. But fate had other plans for her. 2 weeks after Elena first met Adrian Blackwood, the conservatory was preparing for its biggest event of the year. The annual charity gala brought together the richest and most important people in the city. They came to donate money and listen to performances by the school's best students and famous guest artists. Elena had been working extra hours to help prepare for the event. She polished every surface until it shined. She arranged flowers in the main hall. She set up hundreds of chairs in perfect rows. The conservatory had to look absolutely perfect for the important guests. The day of the gala, Elena arrived at work early as usual, but today was different. Staff members were running around everywhere, making last-minute preparations. Caterers brought in fancy food and expensive wine. Musicians practiced their pieces one final time. Everyone was nervous and excited. Elena's job for the evening was simple. She would help set up chairs, make sure the bathrooms were clean, and stay out of sight during the actual performances. The head of housekeeping, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been very clear about this. "Elena, you must be invisible tonight," Mrs. Rodriguez had said. "These are very important people. They don't want to see staff members walking around. Do your work quietly." And quickly, Elena understood. She had worked at events like this before. Rich people didn't like to be reminded that regular working people existed. They wanted to feel like the magic just happened by itself. As the evening began, Elena watched from the back of the hall as guests arrived. The women wore beautiful dresses that cost more than Elena made in 6 months. The men wore expensive suits and shiny shoes. They spoke in quiet voices about business deals and vacations to places Elena had only seen in magazines. The first part of the evening was dinner. Elena stayed in the kitchen, helping to make sure the dirty dishes were washed quickly. She could hear laughter and conversation from the dining room. After dinner, the guests moved to the main concert hall for the musical performances. Elena had finished her main duties, but she stayed nearby in case anyone needed help. She stood in a dark corner near the side exit, where she could hear the music but stay out of sight. She loved listening to the performances, even from a distance. The evening's program included several student performances and one special guest artist. Adrian Blackwood was scheduled to play a violin solo with piano accompaniment. Elena had heard him practice the piece many times over the past 2 weeks. It was a beautiful but difficult composition that required perfect coordination between the violin and piano. The first few performances went smoothly. Young musicians played their hearts out for the wealthy audience. Elena could tell that some of the guests weren't really listening. They whispered to each other and checked their phones. But she listened to every note when it was time for Adrian's performance. Something went wrong. The pianist who was supposed to accompany him had suddenly become very sick. Elena could see people running around backstage, looking worried. The show must go on, but how could Adrian perform without a pianist? Elena watched as Adrian spoke urgently with the event coordinator. She was too far away to hear their words, but she could see the frustration on his face. The audience was getting restless. People were starting to murmur and look at their watches. Finally, Adrian walked onto the stage alone. He approached the microphone with a confident smile, but Elena could see the anger in his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian announced, "I'm afraid our pianist has taken ill at the last moment. However, I believe we can still provide you with some entertainment tonight." Elena wondered what he meant. How could he play a piece that required both violin and piano? Adrian's eyes scanned the room until they found her standing in the shadows. A cold smile crossed his face. "Music is something that should be accessible to everyone, don't you think? Even the simplest person should be able to appreciate and participate in the beauty of classical music." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't like the way he was looking at her. "In fact," Adrian continued, "I'd like to demonstrate this point by inviting one of our hard-working staff members to join me on stage. Music is so universal that even someone with no formal training can participate." All eyes in the room turned to follow Adrian's gaze. Elena realized with horror that he was pointing directly at her. Her heart began to race. What was he doing? "You." "There," Adrian called out, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "The young lady in the blue uniform. Would you please join me on stage?" Elena shook her head and tried to step further into the shadows, but it was too late. A spotlight found her and lit her up like a target. Hundreds of wealthy, powerful people were now staring at her. She felt like a mouse caught in a trap. "Don't be shy," Adrian said, his voice friendly but with an edge that only Elena could detect. "Come on up here. Let's show everyone how accessible music can be." Elena looked around desperately for an escape, but security guards were gently but firmly guiding her toward the stage. The audience was watching with curious interest, as if she were some kind of unusual entertainment. She could hear people whispering about her appearance, her uniform, her obvious discomfort. With no choice, Elena climbed the steps to the stage. Her legs felt weak, and her hands were shaking. She had never been in front of so many people before. The lights were so bright she could barely see the audience, but she could feel their eyes on her. Adrian smiled at her, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed having power over others. "What's your name?" he asked into the microphone. "Elena," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Speak up, Elena. Everyone wants to hear you." "Elena Martinez," she said. Louder, her voice trembling. "Elena has been working very hard to make this evening special for all of us," Adrian announced to the audience. "I thought it would be nice to include her in our performance. After all, music belongs to everyone, regardless of their background or education." Elena wanted to run away, but her feet felt frozen to the floor. She could see Mrs. Rodriguez in the wings, looking horrified and angry. This was exactly what wasn't supposed to happen. Adrian led Elena to the grand piano in the center of the stage. The beautiful black instrument looked enormous and intimidating under the bright lights. Elena had never sat at such an expensive piano before. "Now, Elena is going to help me perform a piece by Rachmaninoff," Adrian announced, his voice full of fake enthusiasm. "It's quite a challenging piece, but I'm sure she'd do her best." Elena's blood turned cold. She knew Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. She had heard it many times and knew how incredibly difficult it was. It was one of the hardest pieces in all of classical music. Adrian was setting her up to fail in front of all these important people. Adrian placed the sheet music on the piano in front of her. The pages were covered with thousands of tiny notes that would challenge even the most skilled pianist. He was making a cruel joke, expecting her to embarrass herself trying to play something impossible. "Just do your best," Adrian said quietly to her, but loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "Nobody expects perfection from someone in your position." Elena looked out at the audience. She could see their faces now, curious and slightly amused. They were waiting to see her fail. They expected her to stumble through a few simple notes while Adrian showed off his superiority. This was their entertainment for the evening. Elena's hands trembled as she placed them over the piano keys. She had dreamed of playing for an audience like this, but not like this. Not as a joke. Not as someone's cruel demonstration of class. Differences. Adrian raised his violin to his shoulder and gave her a nod. "Whenever you're ready, Elena." Elena looked down at the sheet music one more time. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Every eye in the room was on her. Every person was waiting for her to make a fool of herself. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her nerves. She thought about all the time she had listened to this piece. She thought about the hours she had spent studying music in secret. She thought about who she really was. Underneath the uniform and the humble appearance, Elena's fingers found their position on the keys. The audience held its breath, waiting for the disaster to begin. Adrian watched her with cruel anticipation, ready to rescue the performance when she inevitably failed, but Elena Martinez was not who any of them thought she was. And in a few seconds they were all about to find out the truth. Elena's fingers touched the piano keys and something magical happened. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto, No. 2, filled the concert hall with perfect clarity and power. The sound was so pure and confident that even Adrian stopped. Breathing for a moment, the audience, who had been expecting to hear stumbling mistakes, sat in stunned silence. Elena's hands moved across the keyboard with incredible grace and precision. Each note was exactly where it should be, played with the kind of skill that took decades to develop. Adrian had planned to wait a few measures before starting his violin part, giving Elena time to embarrass herself. But the music coming from the piano was so perfect that he found himself automatically lifting his violin to join in. His body responded to the music before his mind could catch up. Elena played the opening section with breathtaking beauty. Her fingers danced across the keys as if they had been born to play this piece. The difficult passages that challenged even professional pianists seemed effortless under her touch. But it wasn't just technical skill. There was something deeper in her playing, an emotional understanding that brought the music to life. The transformation was incredible to watch. Moments before, Elena had been a frightened cleaning lady in a faded uniform, trembling under the stage lights. Now she sat with perfect posture, her face calm and focused, her movements elegant and sure. It was as if a completely different person had taken her place. Adrian tried to concentrate on his own part, but he kept getting distracted by Elena's playing. She wasn't just accompanying him, she was leading the performance. Her interpretation of the piece was more mature and sophisticated than many professional pianists he had worked with. Where had this come from? The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every note. The wealthy donors who had been chatting and checking their phones during earlier performances were now leaning forward in their seats, mesmerized by what they were hearing. Some people had their mouths open in shock. Mrs. Rodriguez stood in the wings, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had worked with Elena for 3 years and had no idea that the quiet cleaning lady possessed such incredible talent. The other staff members gathered around her, equally amazed. Elena reached the most difficult section of the concerto, where the piano part becomes incredibly complex and demanding. Her hands moved faster than seemed humanly possible, playing cascades of notes that sparkled like falling stars. Every note was clear and perfectly timed. Her left hand played a thundering bass line, while her right hand danced through intricate melodies high on the keyboard. Adrian found himself struggling to keep up. This was supposed to be his moment to shine, but Elena was stealing the show without even trying. Her playing made his own performance seem ordinary by comparison. He had spent years perfecting his technique, but Elena played with a natural musicality that couldn't be taught. As the piece continued, Elena seemed to forget where she was. She was no longer aware of the audience or the stage lights or her uniform. She was lost in the music, the way she used to be years ago when music was her whole world. Her face showed the emotions of the piece, sad and joyful and passionate by turns. The audience watched in amazement as the cleaning lady revealed herself to be something extraordinary. Some people recognized that they were witnessing something special, a moment they would remember for the rest of their lives. Others were simply confused, unable to understand how their assumptions had been so completely wrong. Elena's playing told a story of love and loss, hope and despair. She brought out emotions in the music that even Adrian had never noticed before. Her interpretation was deeply personal, as if she had lived through every emotion the composer had written into the piece. Adrian realized that he was no longer the star of this performance. Elena had taken control without saying a word. Her presence at the piano was commanding and confident. She played like someone who belonged on the world's greatest stages, not like someone who cleaned them. The most challenging part of the concerto arrived, where the piano and violin must work together in perfect harmony. Elena and Adrian had never rehearsed together, but somehow their music fit together perfectly. Elena seemed to anticipate every breath Adrian took, every slight change in his tempo. It was as if she could read his musical thoughts. People in the audience began to whisper to each other. Who was this woman? How was this possible? Some of the older patrons, who had been attending classical music events for decades, recognized that they were hearing something truly exceptional. This wasn't just good playing, it was brilliant artistry. Elena approached the final section of the piece, where the music builds to a powerful and emotional climax. Her playing became even more intense and passionate. She put her whole body into the performance, swaying slightly with the music, her fingers flying across the keys with incredible speed and accuracy. Adrian found himself playing better than he had in years, inspired by Elena's performance. Her musicality was lifting his own, playing to new heights. Together, they created something beautiful and moving that neither could have achieved alone. The last notes of the concerto rang out in the concert hall, followed by complete silence. For several long seconds, nobody moved or spoke. The audience seemed frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Then, as if waking from a dream, someone began to clap. The applause started slowly but quickly grew into thunderous appreciation. People rose to their feet, giving Elena and Adrian a standing ovation that went on and on. Elena sat at the piano, breathing heavily as if she had just run a race. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in. She had just performed one of the most difficult pieces in classical music, in front of hundreds of important people, and she had played it perfectly. Adrian lowered his violin and stared at Elena with a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and something that might have been respect. His plan to humiliate her had backfired completely. Instead of making her look foolish, he had accidentally revealed her to be a musical genius. The audience continued to applaud, many of them wiping tears from their eyes. They had come expecting to hear good music, but they had witnessed something much more powerful. They had seen a hidden talent revealed, a person transformed by music from invisible to extraordinary. Elena slowly stood up from the piano bench, her legs still shaking slightly. She looked out at the audience, seeing their faces clearly for the first time. Instead of the cruel amusement she had expected, she saw wonder, appreciation, and respect. Someone in the audience shouted, "Bravo!" and others joined in. People were calling out questions. Who is she? Where did she study? Why haven't we heard of her before? Elena felt overwhelmed by the attention and emotion. She had not performed for an audience in 15 years, and she had forgotten how powerful it could be to share music with others. But she also felt exposed and vulnerable, as if her deepest secrets had been revealed to strangers. Adrian approached her at the piano, his expression complex and unreadable. He extended his hand to her, a gesture that could have been congratulations or apology or simple acknowledgement of what had just happened. Elena looked at his hand for a moment before taking it, as they walked to the front of the stage together. To take their bow, she knew that her life had just changed forever. There would be no going back to being invisible now. The secret she had kept hidden for 15 years was out, and the whole world was about to want answers. The applause seemed to go on forever. Elena stood on the stage, holding Adrian's hand, feeling like she was in a dream. The wealthy audience was on their feet, clapping and cheering for her. Just an hour ago, she had been invisible to these people. Now they couldn't take their eyes off her. As the applause finally died down, Elena and Adrian left the stage. But the moment they stepped into the wings, chaos erupted. People surrounded them immediately. Event organizers, musicians, donors, and reporters all wanted to talk to Elena. "Miss Martinez, where did you study music? Have you performed professionally before? Are you available for interviews? Would you be interested in recording contracts?" Elena felt overwhelmed by all the questions and attention. She looked around for an escape route, but everywhere she turned, someone else wanted to speak with her. The noise and excitement made her head spin. Mrs. Rodriguez pushed through the crowd and took Elena's arm protectively. "That's enough," she said firmly to the people surrounding them. "Elena needs some space right now." Mrs. Rodriguez led Elena to a quiet corner backstage, away from the crowds. Elena's hands were still shaking from the performance and all the excitement that followed. "Elena," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently, "I've worked with you for 3 years. How did I not know you could play like that? That was incredible. You played like a professional concert pianist." Elena didn't know how to answer. She had kept her secret for so long that she had almost forgotten how to talk about her musical background. "It's complicated, Mrs. Rodriguez. I haven't played for an audience in a very long time." Before Mrs. Rodriguez could ask more questions, an elderly man approached them. He was well-dressed and had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Elena recognized him as Dr. Harrison, the director of the conservatory. "Miss Martinez," Dr. Harrison said, his voice full of respect, "I need to speak with you. That performance was extraordinary. I've been running this conservatory for 30 years, and I've rarely heard anything like what you just did." Elena nodded nervously. She knew this conversation was coming, but she wasn't ready for it. Dr. Harrison continued, "I have to ask you directly, have we met before? Your playing seems familiar to me somehow. The way you interpret Rachmaninoff, your technical skills, your musical maturity. This isn't something someone learns in their spare time." Elena looked down at her hands, the hands that had just played one of the most difficult pieces in classical music, the hands that had cleaned these same halls for 3 years. "Dr. Harrison, my full name is Elena Martinez-Chun." Dr. Harrison's eyes widened in recognition. "Elena Martinez-Chen," he repeated slowly. "The Elena Martinez-Chen? The child prodigy who won the International Young Artists Competition 15 years ago?" Elena nodded, feeling tears start to form in her eyes. "Yes, sir, that was me. My God," Dr. Harrison whispered. "You disappeared from the music world so suddenly. Everyone wondered what happened to you. Critics were calling you the most promising young pianist of your generation. You were supposed to have a brilliant career." Word spread quickly through the backstage area. Musicians and staff members gathered around, wanting to hear Elena's story. Even Adrian approached, looking curious and somewhat ashamed of how he had treated her. Dr. Harrison looked at Elena with new understanding. "You were just a teenager when you vanished from the concert circuit. You had recording contracts waiting for you. Major orchestras wanted to work with you. What happened?" Elena took a deep breath. She had not told this story to anyone in years. "I was 17 when I played my last public concert. It was at Carnegie Hall in New York," the critics said. "Wonderful things about my performance. I had my whole career planned out." She paused, trying to find the right words. "But the week after that concert, my family got terrible news. My younger brother Miguel was diagnosed with a rare brain condition. The doctors said he would need expensive treatments for the rest of his life. Our insurance wouldn't cover most of the costs." Elena's voice became quieter. "My parents were immigrants. They worked hard, but they didn't have money for the kind of medical care Miguel needed. The treatments cost thousands of dollars every month. Without them, Miguel would get worse and worse." Dr. Harrison and the others listened in silence, beginning to understand the sacrifice Elena had made. I was the only one in our family who could make enough money to pay for Miguel's care, Elena continued. I had opportunities for concert tours and recording deals, but I couldn't travel around the world playing concerts while my brother was sick at home. Adrian stepped forward, his expression serious. So you gave up your career to take care of your family? Elena nodded. I walked away. From everything. The contracts, the tours, the recordings. I got regular jobs instead. I worked in offices during the day and cleaned buildings at night. Every dollar I earned went to paying for Miguel's treatments. Mrs. Rodriguez put her hand on Elena's shoulder. Elena, why didn't you ever tell me about this? I had no idea you had given up so much. What was the point of talking about it? Elena asked. It was my choice to make. Miguel needed help, and I was the only one who could provide it. Music was just something I used to do. Taking care of my family was more important. Dr. Harrison shook his head in amazement. Elena, do you understand what you sacrificed? You could have been one of the greatest pianists of your generation. You still could be, Elena smiled sadly. Dr. Harrison, I'm 32 years old now. That's old for a classical pianist to be starting a career. Besides, I have responsibilities. Miguel still needs care, even though his condition has stabilized. My parents are getting older and need help too. One of the conservatory professors, Dr. Kim, had been listening to the conversation. She spoke up now. Elena, I remember reading about you in music magazines when I was a graduate student. You were extraordinary even as a teenager. The critics said you had perfect technique and rare emotional depth. They compared you to the great masters. Elena felt uncomfortable with all the praise. That was a long time ago. I haven't performed. Seriously, in 15 years, tonight was just ... an accident. Adrian stepped closer to Elena. That wasn't an accident. What you played tonight was incredible. It was better than many professional pianists I've worked with. You haven't lost your gift, Elena. If anything, you've gained something. Your playing has more emotion and meaning now than it probably did when you were 17. Elena looked at Adrian with surprise. This was the same man who had tried to humiliate her an hour ago. Now he was praising her talent. Dr. Harrison was thinking hard. Elena, I want to ask you something important. Would you consider teaching here at the conservatory? We could offer you a position as a piano instructor. You would be able to use your gift again and still have a stable income to help your family. Elena was shocked by the offer. Dr. Harrison, I don't have teaching credentials. I never finished my formal music education. Your performance tonight is all the credentials you need, Dr. Harrison replied. Besides, some of our most successful teachers are those who have real-world experience, not just academic training. Elena felt torn. Part of her was excited by the possibility of being involved in music again, but another part of her was scared of taking such a big step after so many years away from the music world. I need to think about it, Elena said finally. This is all happening so fast. A few hours ago I was just cleaning these rooms. Now you're offering me a job as a teacher. Dr. Harrison nodded understandingly. Of course, take all the time you need, but Elena, please remember that gifts like yours are rare. The world needs to hear your music. As the crowd began to disperse, Elena found herself alone with her thoughts. Her secret was out now. There would be no going back to being invisible. People knew who she really was and what she had given up. Elena thought about Miguel, sleeping at home, unaware that his sister had just shocked the classical music world. She thought about her parents, who had never stopped believing in her talent even when she put it aside. She thought about the 15 years she had spent working in the shadows, always listening to music but never playing it. Tonight had changed everything. Elena Martinez-Chen was no longer a cleaning lady who used to play piano. She was a pianist who happened to work as a cleaning lady, and now she had to decide what to do with that truth. Elena walked home that night in a daze. The city streets were quiet, but her mind was full of noise. She kept hearing the applause from the concert hall and seeing the amazed faces of the audience. But mixed with those memories were older, sadder, ones that she had tried to forget. Her small apartment was dark when she arrived. Elena lived in a modest building in a working-class neighborhood, far from the elegant world of the conservatory. The contrast between her two lives had never seemed sharper than it did tonight. Elena sat on her old couch and looked around her simple living room. There was no piano here, just a small electronic keyboard that she sometimes played very quietly. Late at night, she had sold her beautiful grand piano years ago to help pay for Miguel's medical bills. She picked up a framed photograph from the table beside her. It showed a much younger Elena standing next to a shiny black grand piano. She was wearing an elegant blue dress and holding a trophy. Her smile was bright and confident. That picture had been taken after she won the International Young Artists competition when she was 16 years old. Elena remembered that day perfectly. She had been so nervous before the competition, but as soon as she started playing, all her fears disappeared. The music flowed through her like water, and she knew she was playing the best she ever had. When they announced her name as the winner, she felt like she was flying. That victory had changed her life. Suddenly, everyone in the classical music world knew her name. Managers called her parents' house every day with offers. Record companies wanted to sign her. Famous orchestras invited her to perform with them. Music magazines wrote articles about the teenage sensation, who was going to be the next great classical pianist. Elena set down the photograph and picked up another one. This one showed her whole family at her graduation from high school. Her parents, Carlos and Maria Martinez, stood proudly beside her. Her father worked in construction and her mother cleaned houses. They had immigrated from Mexico when Elena was very young, hoping to give their children better opportunities. Next to them in the photo was Miguel, Elena's younger brother. He was 14 then, tall and skinny with a bright smile. Miguel had always been Elena's biggest fan. He came to all her concerts and bragged to his friends about his famous sister. In the photo, he was holding Elena's diploma and grinning from ear to ear. Looking at that picture now, Elena felt her heart break all over again. Miguel had been so healthy and full of life then. Neither of them knew that in just 2 years everything would change. Elena remembered the day their world fell apart. She had been preparing for her Carnegie Hall debut, the most important concert of her young career. She was practicing 8 hours a day, working with the best teachers money could buy. Her future seemed bright and certain. Then Miguel started having headaches. At first, their parents thought it was just stress from school. Miguel was a good student and sometimes pushed himself too hard. But the headaches got worse, and Miguel started having trouble remembering things. Elena had been so focused on her upcoming concert that she didn't pay much attention to Miguel's problems at first. She was busy with rehearsals and interviews and fittings for her concert dress. Miguel seemed fine most of the time, and their parents said they were handling it. The night of Elena's Carnegie Hall performance was magical. She played Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1 with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. The audience loved her, and the critics wrote glowing reviews. One newspaper called her a young artist with the soul of a master. Another said she was destined for greatness. After the concert, Elena felt like she was on top of the world. Record deals were waiting for her to sign. Concert tours were being planned. She was going to be rich and famous, able to take care of her family forever. But 3 days after her triumph at Carnegie Hall, Elena got a phone call that changed everything. Miguel had collapsed at school and was in the hospital. The doctors had found something wrong with his brain. Elena flew home immediately, her mind racing with worry. She found her parents in the hospital waiting room, looking scared and confused. The doctors were running tests on Miguel, trying to figure out what was causing his symptoms. When the doctors finally gave them the diagnosis, Elena felt like the ground was falling away beneath her feet. Miguel had a rare genetic condition that was causing his brain to deteriorate slowly. It wasn't cancer, and it wasn't immediately life-threatening, but it would affect his memory, his coordination, and his ability to function normally. The worst part was the treatment. There were experimental therapies that might slow down the disease's progress, but they were incredibly expensive. The treatments would cost thousands of dollars every month. and there was no guarantee they would work. Insurance would only cover a small portion of the costs. Elena's parents were devastated. Carlos made good money in construction, but not enough to pay for treatments that cost more than most people made in a year. Maria worked part-time cleaning houses, but that brought in very little money. They had some savings, but it wouldn't last long against medical bills like these. Elena spent hours researching Miguel's condition online. She read medical journals and talked to specialists. The more she learned, the more she realized how serious the situation was. Without treatment, Miguel would slowly lose his abilities. With treatment, he might be able to live a relatively normal life for many years. The decision Elena faced was impossible. She had contracts waiting for her that would pay her hundreds of thousands of dollars. She could tour the world, make recordings, and build the career she had dreamed of since childhood. But all of that would require her to travel constantly and focus entirely on her music. Miguel needed his family close to him. He needed stability and routine. Most importantly, he needed expensive medical care that their parents couldn't afford alone. Elena spent sleepless nights thinking about her choice. Her talent manager called her every day, reminding her that opportunities like these didn't come along often. "You could have everything," he told her. "Fame, money, artistic fulfillment. You're throwing away the chance of a lifetime." But when Elena looked at Miguel, still weak from his hospital stay, she knew what she had to do. He was her little brother, the boy who had cheered for her at every recital since they were children. He had always believed in her dreams, even when she doubted herself. Now it was her turn to believe in him. Elena called her manager and told him she was canceling all her contracts. She would not be going on tour. She would not be making recordings. She was retiring from professional music to take care of her family. Everyone thought she was crazy. Her teachers begged her to reconsider. Music critics wrote articles about the tragedy of a young artist throwing away her gift. Some people accused her of being ungrateful for the opportunities she had been given, but Elena knew she was making the right choice. She got a job working in an office during the day and another job cleaning buildings at night. She moved back into her parents' house to help with Miguel's care and to save money on rent. Every dollar she earned went toward Miguel's treatments. The first few years were the hardest. Elena watched her former classmates and competitors go on to have the careers she had given up. She saw their names in concert programs and their faces in music magazines. Sometimes she wondered what her life would have been like if she had made a different choice. But whenever she doubted herself, Elena would look at Miguel. The treatments were working. He was stable and happy, able to go to a special school and participate in activities he enjoyed. He still had limitations, but he had a life worth living. Elena knew that without her sacrifice, Miguel might not have had that chance. Over the years, Elena found small ways to stay connected to music. She got the job at the conservatory because she wanted to be around music, even if she couldn't perform it. She bought the small keyboard so she could play quietly when no one was listening. Music was still part of her, even if it couldn't be her whole life anymore. Now, sitting in her apartment after the most incredible night she had experienced in 15 years, Elena felt confused and conflicted. Tonight had reminded her of everything she had given up and everything she had gained. She thought about the path not taken and the path she had chosen instead. Elena picked up her phone and called the hospital where Miguel lived now. He was 29 years old, but his condition required constant care. Elena spoke with his night nurse, who assured her that Miguel was sleeping peacefully. "Tell him I love him," Elena whispered into the phone as she got ready for bed. Elena thought about Dr. Harrison's job offer and all the questions people had asked her tonight. Could she really go back to music after all these years? Did she want to? And most importantly, would it be fair to Miguel and her parents? Elena fell asleep that night with Rachmaninoff's music still playing in her head, wondering if tonight was the end of one chapter of her life or the beginning of a new one. Adrian Blackwood couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his expensive apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening's events over and over in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elena's face when he had called her onto the stage. The fear, the humiliation, The way she had tried to shrink away from the spotlight he had forced upon her, he had meant to embarrass her. He had wanted to make a point about class and education and natural talent. He had thought it would be amusing to watch a cleaning lady stumble through a few notes while he showed off his superiority. Instead, he had accidentally revealed one of the most talented musicians he had ever encountered. Adrian got up and walked to his piano. His apartment was filled with expensive instruments and awards from his successful career. Framed photographs showed him performing with famous orchestras around the world. But tonight, all of his achievements felt hollow compared to what Elena had done on that stage. He sat down and tried to play the same Rachmaninoff piece they had performed together. His technique was perfect, as always, but something was missing. The music felt cold and mechanical compared to Elena's passionate, emotional interpretation. She had played with a depth of feeling that he couldn't match. Despite all his training and experience, Adrian thought about Elena's story, which had spread quickly through the conservatory's network of musicians and staff. By the time he got home, he had received several phone calls from colleagues telling him about Elena Martinez-Chun, the child prodigy who had vanished from the music world 15 years ago. He remembered reading about her when he was a teenager. She had been just a few years younger than him, but already making headlines for her incredible performances. Adrian had been jealous of the attention she received and the praise critics gave her. He had even attended one of her concerts, hoping to find flaws in her playing that would make him feel better about his own abilities. But Elena's performance that night had been flawless. Adrian had left the concert hall feeling frustrated and inadequate. How could someone so young play with such maturity and emotion? It wasn't fair that she seemed to have been born with gifts that he had to work so hard to develop. When Elena disappeared from the concert circuit, Adrian had assumed she couldn't handle the pressure of professional music. He thought she had given up because the competition was too tough. Many young musicians burned out early when they realized how difficult it was to build a lasting career. Now Adrian knew the truth, and it made him feel sick with shame. Elena hadn't given up because she was weak or couldn't compete. She had made an incredible sacrifice to save her brother's life. She had walked away from fame and fortune to take care of her family. While Adrian had been building his career and enjoying his success, Elena had been working multiple jobs and spending every dollar on medical bills. Adrian picked up his phone and looked up articles about Elena from 15 years ago. The critics had been unanimous in their praise. One review said she was a once-in-a-generation talent with the potential to become one of the greatest pianists of all time. Another called her playing transcendent and predicted she would revolutionize classical music. Reading those reviews made Adrian feel even worse. Elena hadn't just given up a comfortable career. She had given up the chance to be legendary. She could have been one of the immortal musicians whose recordings people treasured for generations. Instead, she had chosen to be anonymous and invisible, cleaning the very halls where she should have been performing. The next morning, Adrian arrived at the conservatory early. He had barely slept, and he felt terrible about what he had done. He needed to find Elena and apologize, but when he asked Mrs. Rodriguez where she was, he got disturbing news. "Elena called in sick today," Mrs. Rodriguez said, but her expression suggested she didn't believe Elena was actually ill. She sounded very upset on the phone. "I think last night was too much for her. She probably wants to hide until all this attention dies down." Adrian felt a stab of guilt. "Do you have her address? I need to talk to her." Mrs. Rodriguez looked at him suspiciously. "Why? Haven't you done enough damage already? That poor girl has been through so much, and you humiliated her in front of all those important people." "I know," Adrian said quietly. "That's why I need to apologize. I had no idea who she was or what she had been through. I was cruel and thoughtless, and I need to make it right." Mrs. Rodriguez studied Adrian's face for a long moment. She could see that he was genuinely upset about what had happened. "Elena is a very private person. She doesn't like attention or drama. If you really want to help her, maybe you should just leave her alone." But Adrian couldn't leave it alone. Throughout the day, he heard more and more people talking about Elena's incredible performance. Word was spreading beyond the conservatory to the wider classical music community. Music journalists were calling, wanting to know more about the mysterious pianist who had appeared out of nowhere. Dr. Harrison was fielding dozens of phone calls from concert promoters, recording companies and orchestra conductors who wanted to work with Elena. Everyone was asking the same questions. Where had she been? Why had she stopped performing? Would she consider coming back to the concert stage? Adrian overheard Dr. Harrison on one particularly difficult phone call. "No, I cannot give you her contact information," Dr. Harrison was saying firmly. "Miss Martinez is a private person, and she has not expressed any interest in interviews or recording contracts. Please respect her privacy." When Dr. Harrison hung up, he looked frustrated and tired. Adrian approached him carefully. "Dr. Harrison, this is my fault," Adrian said. "I put Elena in this position without her permission. I never thought about the consequences." Dr. Harrison looked at Adrian with a mixture of disappointment and understanding. "Adrian, I've known you since you were a student here. You're a talented musician, but you've always had a problem with arrogance. Last night, your arrogance backfired in a way that could seriously hurt someone who doesn't deserve it." Adrian felt his face burn with shame. "I know, I was trying to make a point about music being accessible to everyone, but really I just wanted to show off. I thought it would be funny to watch her struggle. I had no idea she was so talented." "The problem isn't that you didn't know she was talented," Dr. Harrison said sternly. "The problem is that you thought it was acceptable to humiliate another human being for your own amusement. Even if Elena had been unable to play a single note, what you did would have been cruel and wrong." Adrian nodded, feeling the full weight of his mistake. "You're right. I need to find her and apologize." "Do you know where she lives?" Dr. Harrison hesitated. "Adrian, Elena is probably overwhelmed right now. She's been living quietly for 15 years, and suddenly she's the center of attention in the classical music world. She might not want to see anyone, especially not the person who put her in this situation." "I understand that," Adrian said. "But I can't just pretend this didn't happen. I need to take responsibility for what I did." Dr. Harrison studied Adrian for a moment, then made a decision. "Elena lives in the Riverside neighborhood, but I'm not going to give you her exact address. If you really want to find her and apologize, you'll have to work for it. Maybe that effort will help you understand how much damage your thoughtless actions can cause." Adrian spent the rest of the day thinking about Alien and what he could possibly say to make up for what he had done. He realized that a simple apology would not be enough. He had reopened wounds that Elena had spent 15 years trying to heal. He had forced her back into a world she had deliberately left behind. As evening approached, Adrian made a decision. He would find Elena, not just to apologize, but to try to understand her story better. He wanted to know what it was like to give up everything for love of family. He wanted to understand the kind of person who could make such an incredible sacrifice. Adrian had grown up with every advantage. His family was wealthy, and he had never had to choose between his dreams and his responsibilities. He had always assumed that people who didn't succeed in music simply weren't talented enough or didn't want it badly enough. Elena's story was forcing him to confront the reality that some people faced impossible choices that had nothing to do with talent or desire. That night, Adrian began his search for Elena. He started by driving through the Riverside neighborhood, looking for clues about where she might live. It was a working-class area, very different from the wealthy neighborhoods where Adrian usually spent his time. The buildings were older and simpler, but the streets were clean and the people seemed friendly. Adrian realized that finding Elena might take time, but he was determined to succeed. He owed her more than just an apology. He owed her the respect and understanding that he should have shown her from the beginning, and perhaps if he was very lucky, he might learn something about himself in the process. Adrian spent 3 days searching for Elena. He drove through the Riverside neighborhood every morning and evening, hoping to spot her on the street or see her coming home from work. But Elena seemed to have vanished completely. She wasn't answering her phone, and she hadn't returned to work at the conservatory. On the 4th day, Adrian decided to try a different approach. Instead of just driving around, he started talking to people in Elena's neighborhood. He went to local shops, restaurants, and community centers, asking if anyone knew Elena Martinez. The first few people he spoke to were suspicious of him. Adrian realized he looked out of place in his expensive clothes and fancy car. People in this neighborhood weren't used to wealthy strangers asking questions about their neighbors at a small grocery store. Adrian spoke to an elderly woman named Mrs. Chun who was buying vegetables. When he mentioned Elena's name, her face lit up with recognition. Elena Martinez? Oh yes, I know her well, Mrs. Chun said in accented English. She is a very good girl, always working so hard to take care of her family. She helps me carry my groceries sometimes when my arthritis is bad. Adrian felt a pang of guilt hearing about Elena's kindness to strangers. Have you seen her lately? I'm trying to find her to talk to her about something important. Mrs. Chun looked at Adrian suspiciously. Are you from the government? Is Elena in some kind of trouble? She's a very honest person. She would never do anything wrong. No, Adrian said quickly. Elena isn't in trouble. I'm a musician. I work with her at the conservatory. I need to apologize to her for something I did. Mrs. Chin's expression softened slightly. You work at the music school. Elena loves music very much. Sometimes I hear her playing piano late at night through her apartment window. Very beautiful. Music, but also very sad. Adrian's heart ached hearing this. Even in her small apartment, Elena couldn't stop herself from making music. But she played quietly and sadly, hiding her gift from the world. Mrs. Chun continued. I haven't seen Elena for several days. This is unusual. She usually walks to the bus stop every morning at the same time. I hope she is not sick. Adrian thanked Mrs. Chun and continued his search. He went to the bus stop she had mentioned and waited there the next morning, hoping Elena would appear. She didn't come, but another woman who was waiting for the bus recognized Elena's name. Elena Martinez? She's my neighbor, the woman said. Lives in the apartment building on Oak Street. But I haven't seen her lately either. Usually she's very regular with her schedule. Adrian found the apartment building on Oak Street. It was an old brick building with 4 floors and no elevator. He looked at the mailboxes in the lobby and found E. Martinez listed for apartment 3B, but when he knocked on her door, there was no answer. Adrian sat on the steps outside the building, wondering what to do next. He felt lost and frustrated. How could he apologize to Elena if he couldn't find her? As he sat there, he noticed a young man watching him from across the street. The young man looked to be in his 20s, but there was something different about the way he moved and stood. He walked slowly and carefully, and his face had a gentle, childlike expression despite his adult size. Adrian realized this might be Miguel, Elena's brother. The resemblance was strong, especially around the eyes and the shape of the face. Adrian crossed the street and approached him carefully. Excuse me, Adrian said gently. Are you Miguel Martinez? The young man smiled brightly. Yes. I'm Miguel. Do you know my sister Elena? She plays beautiful piano music. Adrian felt his throat tighten with emotion. Despite his condition, Miguel's face shone with pride when he talked about Elena. Yes, I know Elena. I heard her play piano. You're right, she's very talented. Miguel nodded enthusiastically. Elena is the best piano player in the whole world. She used to play concerts for lots of people, but now she takes care of me instead. She's the best sister ever. The simple, honest way Miguel spoke about Elena's sacrifice hit Adrian like a punch to the stomach. Miguel understood exactly what Elena had given up for him, and he was grateful for it every single day. Miguel, do you know where Elena is now? I've been looking for her because I want to talk to her. Miguel's expression became worried. Elena has been very sad lately. She comes to visit me at my special home, but she cries when she thinks I'm not looking. I think something happened at her work that made her upset. Adrian realized that Miguel lived in some kind of care facility, probably the place where Elena spent most of her free time. Miguel, could you show me where you live? I would like to visit Elena there. Miguel hesitated. Are you Elena's friend? She doesn't have very many friends. She's always too busy working or taking care of our family. I want to be her friend. Adrian said, and he meant it. I think I hurt her feelings, and I want to say I'm sorry. Miguel studied Adrian's face with the direct, honest gaze that some people with developmental disabilities have. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he nodded. Okay, I can show you. But you have to promise to be nice to Elena. She's had a hard life, but she never complains about it. Miguel led Adrian to a clean, modern building about 6 blocks away. A sign outside read Riverside Care Community, Independent and Assisted Living. It was clearly a place for people with disabilities who needed some help but could live relatively normal lives inside. Adrian met with the facility director, a kind woman named Dr. Sarah Kim. When Adrian explained who he was and why he wanted to see Elena, Dr. Kim's expression became protective. Mr. Blackwood, Elena has been coming here every day since the night of your performance. She sits with Miguel for hours, but she seems very distressed. She told me what happened at the conservatory, and I have to say, I'm not impressed with your behavior. Adrian felt ashamed all over again. Dr. Kim, I know what I did was wrong. That's why I'm here. I need to apologize to Elena and try to make things right. Dr. Kim studied him carefully. Elena has built a very quiet, stable life for herself and her family. She's made incredible sacrifices, and she doesn't deserve to have her privacy invaded or her peace disturbed. I understand that, Adrian said. But I can't undo what I did. All I can do is try to apologize and see if there's any way to help her. Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment, then made a decision. Elena is in the music therapy room with Miguel right now. She brings a small keyboard and plays for him and some of the other residents. It's one of the few times she allows herself to make music anymore. Dr. Kim led Adrian down a hallway to a room with large windows and comfortable furniture. Through the glass door, Adrian could see Elena sitting at a small electronic keyboard. Miguel and several other residents were gathered around her, listening as she played a simple, gentle melody. Adrian's breath caught in his throat. Elena looked different than she had at the conservatory. She was wearing casual clothes, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. Her face was peaceful as she played, and she smiled when Miguel clapped along with the music. This was Elena in her element, making music for people she loved. There was no audience to impress, no critics to please, just the pure joy of sharing music with others. Adrian realized he was seeing the real Elena for the first time. She comes here every day after work, Dr. Kim said quietly. She plays for the residents, helps with activities, and spends time with Miguel. These people adore her. She's like family to all of them. Adrian watched as Elena finished her song and Miguel hugged her tightly. Several other residents clapped and asked for another song. Elena's face glowed with happiness as she started playing again. I never realized, Adrian whispered. She gave up her career, but she didn't give up music completely. She just found a different way to share it. Dr. Kim nodded. Elena understands that music is about more than fame and recognition. She uses her gift to bring joy to people who really need it. In many ways, what she does here is more meaningful than any concert hall performance. As Adrian watched Elena play for her small, appreciative audience, he began to understand what Dr. Harrison had tried to tell him. True artistry wasn't about technical perfection or critical acclaim. It was about using your gifts to serve something greater than yourself. Elena looked up and saw Adrian watching through the window. Their eyes met, and Adrian saw a mixture of emotions cross her face: surprise, embarrassment, and something that might have been fear. Adrian knew this was his chance. He had found Elena, and now he had to find the right words to express everything he was feeling. But more than that, he had to find a way to honor the incredible person she had shown herself to be. Elena stopped playing when she saw Adrian through the window. Her hands froze on the keyboard, and she felt her heart start racing. She had been hiding for days, trying to avoid all the attention and questions that had followed her performance. Now Adrian had found her in the one place where she felt safe and peaceful. Miguel noticed that. Elena had stopped playing and followed her gaze to the window. When he saw Adrian, he waved enthusiastically. "Elena, your friend came to visit." "The one I told you about." Elena felt trapped. She couldn't run away without upsetting Miguel and the other residents who were enjoying the music session. But she also wasn't ready to face Adrian and all the complicated emotions he represented. Dr. Kim opened the door and stepped into the room. "Elena, Mr. Blackwood would like to speak with you. You don't have to if you don't want to, but he says he has something important to tell you." Elena looked at the faces around her. Miguel was excited about the visitor. The other residents were curious about the well-dressed stranger. Dr. Kim's expression was supportive but neutral. Elena realized she couldn't avoid this conversation. "Forever, it's okay," Elena said quietly. "Miguel, why don't you show everyone the new song we learned yesterday?" "I'll be right back." Elena stepped outside the music room and faced Adrian in the hallway. Up close, she could see that he looked tired and stressed. His usually perfect appearance was rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Elena," Adrian began, his voice shaky with emotion, "I've been looking for you for days." "I need to apologize for what I did to you." Elena crossed her arms and looked away. "You already apologized that night at the conservatory. You don't need to keep track of me down to do it again." "Yes, I do," Adrian said firmly. "Elena, I had no idea who you were or what you had been through. I thought you were just a cleaning lady who wouldn't know anything about music. I wanted to embarrass you to make myself look better. That was cruel and wrong." Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "Do you know how it felt to stand on that stage in front of all those people? I spent 15 years trying to become invisible, and you dragged me into the spotlight without asking. You made me into a curiosity, a story for people to gossip about." Adrian's face crumpled with guilt. "I know, I'm so sorry. I've learned about your story, about everything you gave up for your family. Elena, what you did was incredible. You sacrificed your entire career to save your brother's life." "I didn't sacrifice anything," Elena said firmly. "I made a choice. Miguel needed help, and I was the only one who could provide it. I don't regret that choice, and I don't need anyone's pity because of it." Adrian was struck by Elena's strength and dignity. Even now, facing the person who had humiliated her, she stood proud and defended her decisions. "You're right," Adrian said. "It wasn't a sacrifice, it was love. And watching you play for Miguel and the other residents just now, I realized that you didn't really give up music at all. You just found a more meaningful way to share it." Elena was surprised by Adrian's words. She had expected him to try to convince her to return to the concert stage like everyone else had been doing. "Elena," Adrian continued, "I've been thinking about this for days. Everyone wants you to come back to performing professionally. Record companies are calling, orchestras want to work with you, critics want to interview you. But that's not what you want, is it?" Elena shook her head. "I can't travel around the world giving concerts. I have responsibilities here. Miguel needs me, my parents need me. This is my life now." "I understand that," Adrian said. "And I think I have an idea that might work for everyone." Elena looked at him suspiciously. "What kind of idea?" Adrian took a deep breath. "What if we created a foundation together? A music therapy program for people with disabilities and chronic illnesses? You could be the artistic director, designing programs and training other musicians. I could use my connections to raise money and get support from the classical music community." Elena stared at him in surprise. This was not what she had expected him to say. Adrian continued, "You wouldn't have to travel or perform in traditional concert halls. The work would be based here, close to Miguel and your family. But you would be using your incredible gift to help people who really need it. People like Miguel and the residents here." Elena felt her heart beating faster. The idea was tempting, but she was afraid to hope for something that might not work out. "Why would you want to do this?" Elena asked. "You have your own career to worry about." Adrian was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Elena, I've spent my whole life focused on my own success. I've been arrogant and selfish, and I've looked down on people who weren't as privileged as me. Meeting you has made me realize how empty that kind of life is." He paused, looking through the window at Miguel, who was now leading the other residents in clapping along to a song. "You've shown me what real artistry looks like," Adrian continued. "It's not about fame or money or critical reviews. It's about using your gifts to serve others, to bring joy and healing to people who need it. I want to learn how to do that." Elena felt tears running down her cheeks. For 15 years, she had felt like she was the only person who understood that music could be about more than personal achievement. "But what about your career?" Elena asked. "You're already successful. Why would you want to change everything?" Adrian smiled sadly. "My career feels meaningless right now. I can play perfectly, but I don't have the heart that you have. Maybe working with you and learning from you will help me become not just a better musician, but a better person." Elena was quiet for a long time, thinking about Adrian's proposal. The idea of combining her love of music with her desire to help people was appealing. And working with Adrian, despite their difficult beginning, might be a chance for both of them to grow. "What would this foundation actually do?" Elena asked. "We could start here," Adrian said, gesturing toward the care facility. "Bring in professional musicians to work with residents. Develop music therapy programs that could be used in hospitals and schools. Train other musicians to work with people who have disabilities or illnesses." Elena's mind was racing with possibilities. "We could create programs for children with autism, for elderly people with dementia, for people recovering from injuries. "Exactly," Adrian said, excited to see Elena's enthusiasm. "And you could still perform, but for audiences who would truly appreciate and benefit from your music. Your first concert could be right here, for Miguel and his friends." Elena looked through the window at Miguel, who was now trying to conduct the other residents like a little orchestra. The sight made her smile despite her tears. "If we did this," Elena said carefully, "it would have to be done right. This isn't about publicity for us or making ourselves feel good. It's about really helping people." "I understand," Adrian said. "And Elena, I want you to know that I don't expect you to trust me immediately. I know I have to prove that I've changed. But I'm willing to work as hard as it takes to make this succeed." Elena made her decision. "Okay, let's try it. But I have conditions. Miguel and my family come first, always. And if I don't think you're taking this seriously, I'll walk away." Adrian felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Elena. I promise I won't let you down." 3 months later, Elena sat at a beautiful grand piano in the main hall of the Riverside Care Community. The room was filled with residents, their families, and staff members. Miguel sat in the front row, beaming with pride. This was Elena's first public performance in 15 years, and it felt perfect. She wasn't playing for critics or wealthy donors. She was playing for people who understood the healing power of music, because they needed it in their daily lives. Adrian stood beside the piano with his violin, ready to accompany Elena. Over the past months, they had worked together to create music therapy programs in 3 different facilities. Adrian had surprised everyone, including himself, by showing a natural talent for working with people with disabilities. The Elena Martinez Foundation for Music Therapy was becoming a model for other organizations around the country. Professional musicians were volunteering their time. Medical professionals were documenting the benefits of their programs. And families were sharing stories of how music had improved their loved ones' lives. Elena began playing a piece she had composed specifically for Miguel and the other residents. The melody was simple but beautiful, designed to be accessible to people with different abilities. As she played, she saw faces light up around the room. Some people clapped along, others swayed to the music, and a few sang the words they had learned during their music therapy sessions. This performance was being live-streamed to raise awareness for their foundation. Music lovers around the world were watching Elena's return to public performance, but Elena barely thought about the cameras. She was focused on the faces in front of her, the people who had become her true audience. When the concert ended, the applause was thunderous. Elena stood and took Miguel's hand, bringing him up to the stage to bow with her. As they stood together, Elena realized that she had found her way back to music without losing the things that mattered most to her. Adrian approached Elena after the concert, his own eyes bright with tears. "Thank you," he said simply, "for giving me the chance to be part of something meaningful."